Ethan Darrow tightened his grip on the control stick of his aging ship, Vanguard, as it dipped into Corvaris's turbulent atmosphere. Lightning danced across the roiling gray clouds, illuminating the shattered remnants of battles fought long before he arrived. The planet's surface below was a scarred wasteland, littered with the skeletal remains of warships and the charred wreckage of machines built for destruction. To most, it was a graveyard, a place to avoid. To Ethan, it was a gold mine. Corvaris was a battlefield from the centuries-long conflict between the Zir Dominion and the Aurelian Ascendancy. Both factions had left behind countless treasures, alien tech, advanced weaponry, even pieces of their biological enhancements. Ethan's job was to find these remnants, salvage what he could, and sell them to the highest bidder. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept him alive. "Come on, baby, hold together," he muttered, patting the dashboard as the Vanguard shuddered from another gust of wind. His ship was a patchwork of parts salvaged from old battles, barely functional but dependable most of the time. He scanned the terrain below, looking for any signs of fresh debris. His sensors pinged, highlighting a massive crater surrounded by jagged, glowing wreckage. Whatever had gone down there wasn't old. The heat signatures were still fresh. Ethan adjusted his course, curiosity overriding caution. The prospect of finding something valuable, maybe even untouched, was too tempting. As he landed the ship near the edge of the crater, the sight before him made him pause. The battlefield was a mess of shattered Aurelian and Zir tech. Massive war machines lay twisted and broken, their once glorious designs now reduced to smoldering husks. But what caught Ethan's attention wasn't the wreckage, it was the figure lying in the center of the crater. A woman. At least, she looked like a woman, though Ethan could tell immediately she wasn't human. Her golden armor shimmered faintly, even beneath layers of dirt and blood. Intricate patterns etched into the armor pulsed with a faint, otherworldly light, as if responding to her fading life force. Her face was pale, her features sharp and regal, and her violet eyes fluttered open just long enough to glare at him before closing again. Ethan hesitated. This wasn't what he'd signed up for. The smart thing to do would be to leave salvage what he could from the wreckage and pretend he hadn't seen her. If the Zir Dominion or the Aurelian Ascendancy found out he'd interfered, they wouldn't ask questions before killing him. But as he stared down at her, he couldn't bring himself to walk away. She was clearly injured, her breathing shallow, her armor cracked and leaking faint streams of golden energy. Whatever fight she'd been in had nearly killed her. If he left her here, she wouldn't last long. "Damn it," Ethan muttered under his breath, jogging over to her. Kneeling beside her, he hesitated again. Up close, she looked even more otherworldly. Her skin seemed to glow faintly, her hair a cascade of silver streaked with blood. She looked like a goddess brought low. "Hey," he said, shaking her shoulder gently. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes opened again, focusing on him with a mixture of suspicion and desperation. "Help!" "Me," she rasped, her voice commanding despite its weakness. Her accent was strange, her words clipped and precise. Ethan didn't need to be told twice. He slid his arms beneath her, wincing at her weight. Her armor wasn't just decorative, it was dense and heavy, making it a struggle to lift her. Still, he managed to carry her back to the Vanguard, his muscles protesting with every step. As he stumbled into the ship, the Vanguard's AI chirped to life. "Ethan, you appear to be carrying an unidentified life form," the AI said in its usual monotone. "Shall I prepare quarantine protocols?" "No time," Ethan grunted, setting the alien woman down on the mid-bay table. "Just scan her and tell me what I'm dealing with." The AI hummed as it began its analysis. Ethan grabbed a medkit, unsure what half the tools inside even did. He wasn't a doctor, and he definitely wasn't an expert on alien biology. Still, he did his best to clean her wounds, wincing at the strange golden I-cord that oozed from the cracks in her armor. "She is Aurelius," the AI announced. "Designation, Predator. Status, critical. Recommended course of action, immediate stabilization followed by evacuation to Aurelian territory. Yeah, not happening, Ethan muttered. What about the injuries? Can I do anything? Minimal intervention advised. Her physiology will heal naturally with time, provided she is not subjected to additional stress. Ethan glanced at the woman, who had fallen unconscious again. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Guess you're staying with me for now. As he worked to stabilize her, the realization of what he'd just done began to sink in. By saving her, he'd put himself squarely in the middle of a war he had no business being part of. The Zir would be looking for survivors, and if they found her or him there wouldn't be any mercy. He shook his head. Too late to back out now. Who are you? He muttered, glancing at the unconscious warrior. And what the hell did I just get myself into? The low hum of the Vanguard's engines filled the air as the ship drifted through the empty void just outside Corvaris's atmosphere. Ethan sat in the cockpit, chewing on a protein bar and trying not to think about the alien warrior resting in his mid-bay. His nerves were shot. What was he supposed to do now? He was a scavenger, not some galactic hero. The Vanguard's AI interrupted his thoughts. Subject's vitals have stabilized. Consciousness is returning. Ethan sighed, tossing the wrapper aside. Guess I better see if she's in a talking mood. He made his way to the mid-bay, where the alien woman Kalara, as he'd learned from her armor's inscription, was stirring. Her violet eyes snapped open as he approached, locking onto him with laser focus. For a moment, Ethan thought she might leap off the table and strangle him, but she stayed put, her movements sluggish. You, she said, her voice still hoarse but strong enough to carry authority. Where am I? You're on my ship, Ethan replied, leaning casually against the wall. I pulled you out of that mess on Corvaris. You were half dead. Kalara frowned, her gaze shifting to the mid-bay's sterile walls. Why would a human intervene in an Aurelian's battle? What do you want? Ethan shrugged. Not a lot of options out there. Leaving you to die didn't sit right with me. She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she said, you're either a fool or you're lying. Perhaps both. Hey, you're welcome, Ethan said, his tone defensive. You want me to shove you back into that crater? I'm happy to oblige. Kalara smirked faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. No. I owe you my life, human. But do not mistake gratitude for trust. Ethan waved a hand dismissively. Trust me, I'm not looking to be your best friend. Just trying to keep my ship in one piece and maybe get through this alive. Kalara pushed herself into a sitting position, grimacing as she moved. Her armor, though cracked and scorched, still clung to her like a second skin. How long have I been unconscious? About 8 hours, Ethan said. Long enough for the Zir to realize they missed one of you. Her expression darkened at the mention of the Zir. They will come for me. They always do. Ethan crossed his arms. Then maybe you can explain what's so important about you. Or is this one of those if I tell you, I'll have to kill you situations? Kalara hesitated. For a moment, she looked almost vulnerable, her fingers brushing the edge of her damaged armor. You would not understand, she said finally. This war. It is far beyond your comprehension. Try me, Ethan pressed. She sighed, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she relented. I am Kalara Zae, Praetor of the Aurelian Ascendancy. My rank was the highest among our warriors. I led the Third Fleet into battle on Corvaris. But the Zir laid a trap. My forces were annihilated. Ethan raised an eyebrow. So, you're some kind of general? Something like that, Kalara said, her tone curt. But my rank is irrelevant. What matters is what I was carrying. She leaned back against the mid-bay wall, closing her eyes briefly as if summoning the strength to continue. The Zir are after an artifact called the Prism Core. It is an ancient relic, capable of bending the fabric of spacetime itself. My mission was to ensure it did not fall into their hands. Ethan blinked. Spacetime? You mean it's like a time machine? Kalara shot him a withering glare. Do not reduce it to your primitive concepts. The core's power is vast, and its potential is unknowable. It could reshape entire systems, erase civilizations, or rewrite history itself. Ethan whistled. Sounds like something worth fighting over. Worth dying over, Kalara corrected. And many have. Ethan scratched his head, trying to process the gravity of what she just told him. So, let me get this straight. You've got this world-ending artifact, and the Zir are chasing you across the galaxy to get it. And now I'm stuck in the middle because I decided to be a decent person for once. Kalara tilted her head. You could have left me. Many would have. Yeah, well, Ethan muttered, I'm not most people. Kalara steadied him again, her expression softening slightly. No, you are not. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of their predicament settling between them. Finally, Ethan broke the tension. So, where's this prism core now? He asked. Please tell me it's not on my ship. Kalara's lips pressed into a thin line. It is hidden. Safe, for now. But the Zir will not stop until they find it. That is why I must return to the Ascendancy. Only there can it be protected. Ethan rubbed his temples. Great. So now I have to play chauffeur to a super soldier with a galaxy-ending artifact while an entire empire tries to kill us. Kalara smirked faintly. You exaggerate. Only half the galaxy is after us. Ethan couldn't help but laugh, though it was tinged with despair. Fantastic. Just what I needed in my life. Kalara's expression grew serious again. You saved me, human. I do not take such debts lightly. I will protect you. For as long as you remain useful. Gee, thanks, Ethan said dryly. That's the most reassuring thing I've heard all day. Despite the banter, a strange understanding began to form between them. Neither trusted the other completely, but for now, their fates were intertwined. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Rest up, Ethan said, turning to leave the med-bay. Something tells me we're going to need all the energy we can get. As he walked back to the cockpit, Kalara's voice stopped him. Ethan. He turned, surprised to hear his name from her lips. Thank you, she said softly. The words seemed foreign to her, like they didn't come easily. Ethan nodded, unsure how to respond. Yeah. Don't mention it. As the door slid shut, Kalara leaned back against the wall, her mind racing. The human was a mystery, but one thing was certain, her survival now depended on him as much as his did on her. The icy moon, Lyra 7, loomed in the viewport like a pale, jagged gemstone. Its surface was a chaos of towering ice spires and winds that howled endlessly across its frozen plains. Ethan maneuvered the Vanguard into a cautious descent, the ship's engines groaning in protest against the moon's gravity and frigid atmosphere. Why here? He asked, glancing back at Kalara, who stood behind him, her golden armor patched and functional again. Her violet eyes stayed fixed on the view outside, scanning for threats. The Zir are tracking us, she said simply. Lyra 7 is desolate, its atmosphere rife with interference. It will delay their sensors briefly. Ethan grunted. Delay's not exactly the word I was hoping for. I was thinking more like avoid completely. Kalara didn't reply. Her focus remained sharp, her hand resting on the hilt of her repaired staff blade. Even in this brief respite, she radiated tension, like a spring wound too tight. The Vanguard landed with a heavy thud, kicking up a cloud of frost and steam. Ethan powered down the engines, the cabin falling silent except for the faint hum of life support. We need to set up a defensive perimeter, Kalara said, already heading for the ramp. The Zir will not take long to find us. Great, Ethan muttered, grabbing his plasma rifle. Another day, another fight to the death. Outside, the moon's surface was even more brutal than it appeared from orbit. The wind cut like a blade, and the cold seeped through Ethan's scavenger gear in seconds. Kalara, however, moved through the hostile environment as if it were an afterthought. Her armor's internal systems emitted faint, golden heat, melting the frost beneath her boots. Ethan followed her to a ridge overlooking the landing site. From this vantage point, they could see the Vanguard below, its hull already dusted with frost, and the endless expanse of icy terrain stretching into the horizon. Kalara studied the horizon intently, her sharp gaze scanning for any sign of movement. The Zir will send scouts first. Then heavier forces once they confirm our location. Ethan adjusted the scope on his rifle. You've done this before. More times than I care to count, she replied. Her tone was neutral, but there was a weariness in her words, a glimpse of the toll her endless battles had taken. They didn't have to wait long. A faint hum cut through the howling wind. At first, Ethan thought it might be the moon's natural sounds, but Kalara's posture tensed immediately. They're here, she said. Ethan followed her gaze, spotting a squad of sleek, black Zir drones darting through the sky. They moved with mechanical precision, scanning the area with beams of crimson light. Kalara raised her staff blade, its edge glowing faintly as she crouched behind an ice spire. Stay low, she ordered. Ethan ducked behind another formation, his heart pounding. The drones circled closer, their searchlights sweeping dangerously near. Kalara waited, perfectly still, until one drone broke formation, veering toward their hiding spot. Without hesitation, she leapt forward. Her movements were a blur, her staff blade slicing through the air in a golden arc. The drone shattered, its remains crashing to the ice with a metallic screech. The other drones immediately honed in on her position. Ethan, she shouted. Cover me. Ethan raised his rifle and fired, his shot scattering the drones as they descended. One exploded in a flash of sparks, but the others were too fast. They dodged and weaved, returning fire with bursts of red energy. Ethan dove behind cover as a beam scorched the ice where he'd been standing. Kalara, meanwhile, was relentless. She darted between the drones with deadly precision, her staff blade cutting them down one by one. Within moments, the air was quiet again, the wreckage of the drones littering the frozen ground. Ethan emerged cautiously, his rifle still raised. That was just a warm-up, wasn't it? Kalara nodded grimly. The main force will arrive soon. They barely had time to regroup before the horizon erupted with activity. A massive Zir warship descended from the stormy sky, its dark hull bristling with weapons. Smaller dropships detached from its underside, descending toward the moon's surface with blinding speed. Ethan's stomach sank. We can't fight that. We don't need to, Kalara said, her voice calm but firm. We just need to survive. As the first wave of Zir soldiers deployed, the battle began in earnest. Kalara was a force of nature, moving with a speed and grace that seemed almost impossible. Her staff blade cleaved through enemy after enemy, her golden armor glowing brighter with each strike. Ethan did his best to keep up, taking potshots from behind cover. His rifle was no match for the Zir's advanced weaponry, but he managed to pick off a few soldiers. Still, it was clear they were outnumbered and outgunned. Then, the Zir commander appeared. He was massive, easily twice the size of an ordinary soldier, clad in black armor that seemed to absorb light. A long, serrated blade crackling with red energy rested in his hands. His voice boomed across the battlefield. Praetor Kalara, he called. You cannot escape. Surrender the Prism Core, and I will grant you a swift death. Kalara stepped forward, her stance defiant. You have no idea what you're meddling with, Commander Thalix. The core will not fall into your hands. The commander laughed, a deep, chilling sound. Your arrogance is tiresome. Very well. Die with your secrets. Their blades clashed, sending shockwaves through the air. Ethan watched in awe as the two warriors engaged in a brutal duel, their movements too fast to follow. Kalara's strikes were precise, her staff blade singing with energy, but Thalix's strength was overwhelming. He pushed her back, forcing her to retreat with every swing. Ethan knew she couldn't hold out forever. He scanned the battlefield, his mind racing. His rifle wouldn't do much against Thalix, but maybe he didn't need to kill him, just distract him. Come on, think, he muttered. His eyes landed on a damaged Zir drone nearby, its power core still glowing faintly. An idea struck. Ducking behind cover, Ethan sprinted toward the drone, prying its core loose. It was unstable, sparking dangerously in his hands, but it would have to do. He overcharged it, the core emitting a high-pitched whine, and hurled it toward Thalix with all his strength. Hey! Over here! Ethan shouted. Thalix turned just as the core detonated. The explosion staggered him, giving Kalara the opening she needed. With a roar, she surged forward, her blade slicing clean through his armor. Thalix collapsed, his weapon clattering to the ground. The battlefield fell silent. Kalara stood over Thalix's body, breathing heavily. She turned to Ethan, her expression unreadable. You saved me, she said. Ethan shrugged, trying to play it cool despite his pounding heart. Figured it was the right thing to do. Kalara's gaze softened just a little. Then I owe you another debt, human. Before Ethan could respond, the sound of engines roared overhead. More Zir ships were arriving. They didn't have much time. Come on, Kalara said, grabbing his arm. We need to leave. As they ran back to the Vanguard, Ethan couldn't help but wonder if he'd just traded one disaster for another. Whatever Kalara was carrying, it was more dangerous than he'd imagined, and now, he was in it for the long haul. The Vanguard blasted off from the icy surface of Lyra 7, its engine straining as it climbed through the moon's stormy atmosphere. Ethan gritted his teeth, his hands tight on the control stick. The Zir weren't letting up. Their warships hovered above, firing volleys of plasma bolts that rocked the Vanguard to its core. I could use a little help here, Ethan shouted, glancing over his shoulder at Kalara. She stood in the cockpit's doorway, her expression calm despite the chaos around them. I'm on it, she said, striding to the weapons console. Her fingers danced over the controls, and the ship's automated turrets came to life, spitting golden beams of energy. The blasts weren't strong enough to destroy the Zir ships, but they provided enough cover for Ethan to maneuver through the onslaught. We can't keep this up forever, Ethan yelled as a plasma bolt grazed the hull, sending sparks flying. Just get us to hyperspace, Kalara replied, her voice steady. I'll handle the rest. Ethan didn't argue. He punched the coordinates into the NAV computer, his mind racing. The ship lurched as another volley hit, but the engines held. With a final burst of speed, the Vanguard cleared the moon's gravity well and jumped into hyperspace. The cockpit fell silent, the hum of the engines the only sound. Ethan slumped back in his seat, letting out a long breath. Remind me to never do that again, he muttered. Kalara didn't respond immediately. She was staring at the viewport, her gaze distant. Finally, she turned to face him. We're not safe yet, she said. The Zir will track us. It's only a matter of time. Ethan rubbed his temples. Yeah, I figured as much. So, what's the plan? Because I'm all out of ideas. Kalara hesitated, something uncharacteristic flickering across her face, uncertainty, maybe even vulnerability. She stepped closer, her violet eyes locking onto his. I need your help, Ethan. The words took him by surprise. He straightened in his seat, raising an eyebrow. Did I just hear that right? You need my help? Kalara nodded, though the admission seemed to pain her. You've proven yourself more capable than I expected. Resourceful. Brave. I cannot complete my mission alone. Ethan leaned back, crossing his arms. Okay, I'll bite. What exactly do you need from me? I must return to the Aurelian Ascendancy, Kalara said. The Prism Core is too dangerous to remain with me. My people must secure it, or the Zir will use it to destroy everything in their path. And by everything, you mean entire systems, she said bluntly. Planets. Civilizations. The Zir care nothing for balance or preservation. They seek only dominance. Ethan let out a low whistle. So, basically, if they get this thing, we're all screwed. Precisely, Kalara said. She took a step closer, her tone softening. But I cannot reach the Ascendancy without your ship. Without you. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Hold on. You're this unstoppable warrior, a praetor, or whatever. You're telling me you need me? A scavenger with a junker ship? Kalara's gaze didn't waver. Yes. Your simplicity is advantageous. The Zir expect soldiers, fleets, not a lone human salvager. You can move where I cannot. Ethan chuckled, though there was no humor in it. So, what, I'm your smuggler now? Your intergalactic Uber driver? If that is how you wish to see it, Kalara said, her tone dry. But understand this, Ethan. You are more than you appear. Your courage saved me twice. I trust you will do what is right. Her words gave him pause. He wasn't used to hearing things like that, especially from someone like her. For a moment, he considered saying no, leaving her at the next station and forgetting all about this insane adventure. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she looked at him, not with pity or disdain, but with respect. Maybe it was the weight of what she'd told him about the Prism Core and the Zir's plans. Or maybe he just didn't want to go back to scavenging scrap, pretending his life had no purpose. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. All right, he said finally. I'll help you. But let's get one thing straight, I am not doing this for free. You owe me, big time. Kalara's lips twitched into what might have been the ghost of a smile. Fair enough. When this is over, you'll be well compensated. The Ascendancy rewards its allies generously. Yeah, Ethan said, waving her off. Just don't get us killed before we get there. Kalara extended her hand, and Ethan hesitated before taking it. Her grip was firm, her eyes steady. Then we are allies, she said. Allies, Ethan echoed. He released her hand, glancing at the NAV console. So, where are we headed? Kalara stepped back, folding her arms. The Aurelian core worlds. But it won't be easy. The Zir will anticipate our route. We must be unpredictable. Ethan smirked. Unpredictable's my middle name. Let's see how they like a few detours. As he set the new course, Kalara returned to her post at the weapons console, her presence a steady, reassuring weight in the small cockpit. Despite the danger ahead, Ethan felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in a long while, he had a purpose. And though the road ahead was fraught with peril, he wasn't facing it alone. The Vanguard hurtled through hyperspace, carrying them toward an uncertain future and a fight that would decide the fate of the galaxy.